Welcome inside this edition of Big Ten Today. Rick Pizzo alongside Howard Griffith. Howard, we're 1 day away from the teams arriving in Atlanta in advance of Monday night's national title game. It's really starting to feel like it is here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you think about what this is really what college football and your teams are the culmination of the plans and the thoughts and the ideas that these teams had really going back several months ago to be in this situation. And now they find themselves a few hours away, really a few days away from having an opportunity to really hoist that national championship trophy.
It is not just our big story. It is the biggest story in all of sports right now. Ohio State and Notre Dame, Monday night, Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. You look at the regular season records. Notre Dame's loss to Northern Illinois, really more damaging from a metric standpoint than Ohio State's loss to Michigan, though you talk to the Buckeye fan base, and that certainly isn't the case. Notre Dame went 4-0 against AP-ranked teams during the regular season. Ohio State had a pair of those wins, and of course the one loss to Oregon and the run through the playoffs. Remarkably impressive for both of those teams. But Howard, it really is very similar when you look at what these teams have been through. I think Ohio State was expected at the beginning of the year to be here. Maybe not so much with Notre Dame. After the Irish lost to Northern Illinois, everybody gave up on them. And I think the same was true for Ohio State after they lost to Michigan for a fourth straight time.
Yeah, I think you think about the storylines and really what these both teams were really up against. And obviously you talked about Notre Dame with the NIU loss early. People don't like Notre Dame for a lot of reasons, but really at that point said, hey, they're done, it's over. But being a Notre Dame fan and understanding what goes on, all you need to do is continue to win football games, and that's what happens in that scenario. So they had opportunities to overcome a lot of the things that were happening earlier in the season. You look at Ohio State, everyone talks, as you mentioned, they talk about the Michigan game. You talk about really when this team was put back together and all those commitments, the guys decided they were coming back. Here was the expectation. You know what they were, win the Big Ten, beat Michigan, and obviously make a run for the national title. Well, only one is still there, and if you talk to most people around the country, this is the most important part of it. And it's sitting right there. And what would we hear them talk about? The stories. They want to continue to play for another week because they believe there are so many stories about this roster, about these coaches that need to be told, and feel as though the only way those are going to be told is if they win this game. That's why they talk about we want to finish this the right way.
Players certainly have to buy in, but the coaches also have to handle the situations correctly after moments like Ohio State and Notre Dame have lived through this year. And so Ryan Day and the staff obviously deserves a ton of credit. A very different situation right now for Ryan Day than it was on November 28th. But let's also not forget about what Marcus Freeman has done. He is a very young head coach. He's only in his third year at Notre Dame. That is a massive job and his first major college head coaching job. So both of these guys deserve a ton of credit for keeping their teams together and getting them now on the precipice of the ultimate goal.
Yeah, you think about this. You go back to Marcus Freeman, and one of the times they played against Ohio State, how about the goal line stand when they only had, 10 people on the field and not 11? And he had some problems at really articulating what was going on, taking the penalty, not taking the penalty. These are some of the things that happen when you become a first-time head coach, particularly when you're a defensive coordinator. You have a defensive background. There's some parts of the game that you really are not in tune to all the time. And what did he do? He went out and got Mike Denbrock on the offensive side of football, a guy that has great experience in calling plays and understands what to do with the quarterback position. That really helped him be able to develop as a head coach. This still is a massive job, and he'll tell you from the beginning, his biggest issue when he took this job was being able to say no, because everybody was reaching for Marcus Freeman because everyone wanted to hear just what he was going to do and the fact that he was at Notre Dame and being an African-American. You look back at Ryan Day. We talked about the issues that he's had not being able to beat Michigan. But here's what's interesting. He finds a way to really push all the buttons. And I think bringing Chip Kelly in allowed him to be able to do this. He gave us a little bit of insight behind the curtain when he talked about, hey, sometimes he has to say, go to the coach and say, you want to run a screen here? And why is he able to do that? Because now he's able to look at a higher level and really be able to lead the entire team. As before, he needed to be in implementing the game plan, deciding what plays were going to be called, and then try to figure out what's going on with special teams and offensively. He hasn't had to do that as much now that Chip Kelly is there running this offense. So there are a lot of ways to continue to grow as a head coach. Both of these guys are in pressure-packed situations that their expectations are to win national championships, and they both have an opportunity to do that Monday night.
Yeah, you're related to business. You can't be the CEO and also try to be the COO and the CFO, and that's basically what Ryan Day was doing. Now he has Chip Kelly. He has an experienced DC in Jim Knowles. And the proof is in the pudding throughout the college football playoff. Howard, Ohio State hasn't just looked good. They've looked, and I hesitate to use the word unbeatable because every team is beatable, but I think everybody in the nation outside of South Bend agrees that if the Ohio State team that played the first half against Oregon, if the Ohio State team that played most of the game against Tennessee and much of the game against Texas shows up, they are not just favorites, they are massive favorites. They've looked that good throughout the course of January and late December.
Yeah, and I think the important part of this is so often we want teams to be playing at their highest, their best during the regular season. We want to see that, but we've seen it. That's not when they need to be able to peak. They need to peak now. And this is what you've seen this team do. And you mentioned the first two games in the playoffs that they just were able to go out and dominate. Then the last game they played, you look at the numbers of this last game they played, if you didn't watch the game, you would have thought they probably lost the game, because of the way they were struggling offensively and not doing everything they needed to, weren't getting the explosive plays that they were getting in the first two games, but they found a different way to win. This defense, you can take them anywhere. Right now, the way they're playing, man, it's hard to bet against them because they're playing so well. Their stars are playing at a very high level on the defensive side, and I would argue probably the best that they've played in the last 2, maybe 3 years as a total unit. Everyone playing at a high level.
These are two historically successful programs, certainly among the 10 most famous, most successful in the history of college sports. They already both have rich legacies, but it's been a minute since Notre Dame has won it all. And it's been a decade since Urban Meyer led Ohio State to its last national championship. Let's start with Notre Dame and the Irish and Marcus Freeman, and obviously the storyline that he would be an African-American coach to win a national championship as well, the first in the playoff era. So what would a win mean, not just for Marcus Freeman, but for Notre Dame in its quest to once again become a college football blue blood?
Well, let's think about this. The way Notre Dame has to go out and win a championship, a national championship, is much more difficult than most, because they can't really afford to lose games. They have, and if they lose one, they have to put the type of season they put together this year to be able to get into the playoffs and play and be able to go out and do it. But what you see Notre Dame being able to do, the last time when they've been able to get into the 14 playoffs, they've been run off the field in mostly every opportunity that they've had when they've been able to be right there. So much so that their former head coach said, hey, I need to go somewhere else, LSU, to win a national title where people are committed. It's not necessarily the storyline, is it?
That didn't work out so well for Brian Kelly.
Hasn't worked out so well. But what you've found is they've been able to do a great job recruiting. They've elevated the coaching. I think it's at a very high level right now. And the players are playing not only for themselves, but they're willing to sell out for the coaching staff. And I think that's a big part of what people miss when you start talking about the team, how much they believe in the guy at the front of the room. Always want your guy, one of the coordinators to be, but he's always been that special kind of guy. And I think they really did a great job of recognizing and giving him the opportunity to lead this team. And listen, now he's turned into what, arguably one of the hottest young coaches out in America right now?
Yeah, I would say inarguably, without question.
So much so, NFL people want to talk to him as well.
As for Ryan Day, I understand that there was vitriol after 4 straight losses to Michigan. That game is so important to the Ohio State fan base. But you look at his body of work and the ridiculous amount of success that he has had. He is now 1 game away from, and I don't want to say exercising all of those demons, because there is a portion out there that would still rather beat Michigan than win the national title. I don't understand
That's a different day.
I know I'm different. Thank you. Different conversation for a different moment. But for Ryan Day specifically, what do you think this would mean?
He gets an opportunity to really excel, right? Because the pressure that he has been under, although you go out and you say, hey, we want to win a national championship, these are our stated goals, you accept that pressure, right? You understand. And I always talk about no one could put more pressure on you than the individuals. And they've done that. The difference is we've seen and we hear the stories about how this is worn not only on him, his coaches, but their families, extended families. And That's not the fair part of it, but that's where college football
life.
is right now. This is where it is. So for him to do that shows that he can still do it the way he wanted to do it, right? The way he wanted to build this team. And I think you can say a lot of things. He has elevated this defense by going and getting Jim Knowles. That defense has continued to get better. When you look at the wide receiver crop, and I remember when he first took over, he talked about, I just don't want guys that can run fast. I want guys that can run routes the speed we can get up to. But if they can run routes, create separation, that's going to be a difference. And he's been able to do that. So when you take a step back and look at all the things that Coach Day has been able to do at Ohio State, it has been remarkable. And yes, he took over a team that was loaded, but he has continued to elevate that recruiting as well.
And it is never easy to be the man after the man, which is exactly what Ryan Day did after Urban Meyer went not just to a national title game and won it, but also never lost a game to Michigan. Of course, he doesn't refer to them as Michigan. He refers to them as the Wolverines, or that team up north. Don't forget, when the national title game is done on Monday, we bring you the national championship post game. And earlier in the day, we'll have a special pregame show. Our coverage starts at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific time. Our crew will be in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We'll also have coverage here from the studio as well. We have you covered from start to finish on National Championship Monday. Earlier this week, the College Football Hall of Fame announced its incoming class of 2025. Some names very familiar to Big Ten fans, like Wisconsin's record-setting running back Montee Ball, former Minnesota center Greg Esslinger, a couple of players who didn't play their college careers inside the Big Ten, but whose schools now are members of the league, including Haloti Ngata and Dennis Thurman of Oregon and USC, respectively. And, of course, our friend, our colleague, and three-time national championship head coach Urban Meyer. And we are thrilled that Coach Meyer is able to join us today. Urban, first and foremost, congratulations. We appreciate the time. I'd love to know what your reaction, your emotion was when you found out the news.
Oh, it was incredible. I was actually at the Orange Bowl, and Steve Hatchell said, "I need your number." And I turned to him, and he kind of looks at me, and I said, "You need my number, and I just want to make sure your number's correct." And he kind of gave me that look, and he said, "Don't say anything. I'll call you next week." And that was it. And I walked away, and I wasn't quite sure, but I had an idea. And then I talked to Shelly, and I said, "I think maybe we got in the Hall of Fame." She's like, I mean, it's very humbling for a guy that has devoted so much of my life, because I was a young person, and not like a lot of people. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to play as long as I could, and I wanted to coach college football, so it's a dream come true.
A dream come true that includes, as I mentioned, 3 national championships at 2 different schools. You're one of only 4 men in history to have won national titles at multiple schools at major college institutions. And I'm sure they all stand alone for different reasons. So when you think back on the national titles, how do they stand by themselves? And what are your various emotions when you think back to each of the 3?
You're very correct there that they all stand alone. 06 was really a team that, was just in a fight constantly. A little bit like this Notre Dame team that's going to play. We weren't picked to finish real high and just played great defense. And then we had Tebow and Chris Leak, and we won it. And that was special. It was the first one. The second one was probably the best team I've ever had. I mean, that was the 08 national championship team that was beat Oklahoma, Tebow against Sam Bradford. And then the Ohio State was the so talented but improbable with a third-string quarterback. And I'm from the great state of Ohio. So each one lives in its own memory, but they were all great memories.
Urban, you coached against at least 2 other notable names in this Hall of Fame class. I mentioned Montee Ball, and it's funny, his last year at Wisconsin was your first year in Columbus. You beat the Badgers in overtime that year on your way to an unbeaten season. But Montee went for 191 and ran 39 times in that game against your defense. What do you remember about him as a player?
I loved him as a player. He a great combination of size and speed. And with Wisconsin, I'll tell you, it was amazing the run that they had of those running backs. And I got to coach against a bunch of great ones. But Montee Ball was my first experience in Madison, Wisconsin as a coach, and it was a freaking street fight. And I remember he did dive across the end zone, and we knocked the ball out on the one play. But great respect for him, and certainly he did a number on us that day.
And of course, Urban, on the way to that national title that you won with Ohio State, you beat a Nick Saban-coached Alabama team in the semifinals at the Sugar Bowl in a game that many of us still consider to be one of the best playoff games that's ever been played during the era in a decade plus. And you go in alongside Nick. How fitting is that for you guys that of this generation, I think when people think of the great coaches in college football, the two of you are constantly being linked?
Well, I'm honored to be in the same sentence as Coach, and we've competed against each other many times. We've been friends for a long time, and I was just with him the other day at a charity event. So, Nick Saban will go down as the greatest coach of all time, and I was part of that era. That saw that SEC. We started in 06 and went on a run where the SEC dominated. It's ironic now that the Big Ten has kind of flipped the script on this thing. So it's a great honor all the way around.
All right, speaking of national titles, Urban, I'd love to get two thoughts on Monday's title game, starting with Ohio State specifically. For you, what's been the most impressive thing about what the Buckeyes have done since the way the regular season ended against Michigan?
Yeah, I was a little concerned, like the whole country, and certainly Buckeye Nation was. I was at that Wolverine game, and it's one of the great turnarounds I've ever seen. You still had a great season, but just not a good way to end. And that tells you about the power of the playoff too. I mean, in the old days, you'd be done. I remember we lost to Michigan State one year, and it's over. And I thought we had the best team in the country. Ohio State is the best team in the country. They have been all year, most talented team maybe in the last decade or longer. And so the leadership in that locker room must be phenomenal. I keep hearing about it. It's a little bit like the Wolverine team of last year, where you have so many veteran players that were on a mission. And the Wolverine team last year with Blake Corum and the quarterback McCarthy and all that. Now you have this year's Buckeye team, Sawyer and JT and all these veterans coming back with a purpose. And that purpose is now 60 minutes away on Monday.
All right, finally, Urban, let's finish with that 60 minutes. I know it never comes down to one thing, but what ultimately do you think makes the difference on Monday night between victory and defeat for Ohio State?
Yeah, I've been looking at this. Obviously, I'm a fan of both schools. I coached at Notre Dame. I'm Irish Catholic, and that was, one of my dream places to live and work. And I was there as an assistant, and obviously I'm from Ohio, and being the Buckeye coach is a dream come true. So I just think I've gone through this Ohio State roster all year, and I went back and watched these last three games. Every skilled player, I really believe that every skilled player at Ohio State will start in the National Football League, and most of the backups will too. I didn't say play and get drafted. They're going to start in the National Football League. And then you got another team that is playing great defense, but they're banged up. The great tailback only had 16, 17 carries in the last two games, and their defense is phenomenal, led by Al Golden, the defense coordinator. They're really, really good. I just think Notre Dame has got a unique locker room, a refuse-to-lose mentality that's going to keep this thing really tight at halftime, and then the second half, those skilled athletes on both sides is going to take over the game in the second half, and I think the Buckeyes will win the game.
Should be an amazing night Monday in Atlanta. An amazing week for Urban Meyer, now officially a College Football Hall of Famer. Coach, really appreciate the time. Congrats again, and enjoy the game on Monday night.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Michigan State just keeps rolling. Spartans 90-85 over Penn State on Wednesday night. 10 straight wins now for Michigan State. Longest such streak since the 18-19 season, which ended in the Final Four. Frankie Fiddler had 18. Jaden Akins continues to do his thing as well. Penn State now has dropped 4 in a row, including a brutal 3-game stretch with games against Oregon, Illinois, and then Michigan State on Wednesday night. Rapheal Davis here to break it all down for us. What do you like the most about what you're seeing from Michigan State during this stretch?
They're back to their culture. And I've been there. I've been in a locker room where I was at Purdue. We lost the way about ourselves. There was a time where played in the CBI. We were last place in the Big Ten because our culture wasn't right. Our locker room wasn't good. We didn't have leadership. So that's what I love the most about the Spartans. They got their locker room back. They got that Tom Izzo, that magic, it's back in the locker room. They're listening to the coach. They're buying in defensively. It's back to Michigan State branded basketball. They defend at a high level. The best scoring defense in the conference, the best field goal percentage defense in the conference. They're the best rebounding team. You know Coach Izzo is going to care about that glass. And then they lead the country in transition points. Michigan State is back to who they are identity-wise, and it's showing on the floor.
Isn't it easier, though, for Izzo to keep the identity the way that he wants it in East Lansing, being one of the few coaches, along with Matt Painter, who doesn't necessarily avoid the transfer portal, but who prefers to do it in the traditional fashion? These guys were recruited, the majority of them, by Michigan State. They've played multiple years in East Lansing, and I look back on those teams that made runs to the Final Four, whether it was the 19 team, the unexpected team a few years earlier. The one common thread is that all those guys went through these battles together for multiple seasons.
Yeah, because they know it's expected. You look at Jeremy Fears, he was recruited by Coach Izzo. He got to talk to guys like Mateen Cleaves, got to talk to guys like Draymond Green, even Kalen Lucas and those dudes. So they understand that this is a big deal, and they understand that we can't go back to Michigan State of last year or the year before, or we won't be remembered as those great legends, those Spartans that have come through that gym, that get to put their stuff in that alumni locker room in the Breslin Center. That's what Michigan State basketball is all about. They keep it in-house. The former guys encourage the current guys, and I'm looking at a guy in Jay Nakins. He has really answered the call leadership-wise. He's a guy that's going to guard hard on the defensive end, going to play his tail off offensively, going to make some shots. But in that locker room, in those four walls, he has those guys' ears. He has them connected. And that's what the brand of basketball has to be for the Spartans. It's in the locker room, and now it's showing on the floor. Because you think about it, they've had 8 or 9 different leading scorers this season. They don't care who shoots the ball. They don't care who scores it. They don't care about anything but defending hard, rebounding the ball, running, and winning. And that's what's showing out for these guys.
Yeah, it's a great point about Akins with A.J. Hoggard moving on to different pastures. Akins knew that he was going to be the leader on the floor, and all these Tom Izzo teams, we keep talking about common threads. They have always had a true leader at that position. Akins clearly becoming that guy. So Michigan State is red hot. You can make the same statement about the Purdue Boilermakers, though in the first half against Washington on Wednesday night, they were ice cold. Purdue really struggled, and then completely flipping the script after halftime. They outscored the Huskies by 19 in the second half. How'd they do it?
Coach Painter got those guys' attention at halftime. I can only imagine the words that were said in that locker room, whether it be from Coach Painter, Coach Brantley.
We're not going to repeat any of them right now. This is a family program.
Or even from Braden Smith. You could tell in that first half, Braden was getting frustrated that his guys were not going. When you look at how Purdue's been successful over this winning streak, they've been defending at a high level. They've been rebounding the ball at a high level, and they've been taking care of the basketball. In that first half at Washington, 7 turnovers, and they've only averaged 8 turnovers a game coming into last night. They were out-rebounded in the first half. They took too many ill-advised quick jumpers. They were getting pushed around. They were getting bodied up on cuts. And in that second half, it just flipped the whole entire game, and I think it started with their defense. Because Washington was comfortable in the first half. 48% from the field, got whatever look they wanted to. They wanted to muck up this game. Purdue's defense shut that down. Washington goes 37% in the second half. They forced 17 turnovers for the game. Purdue ended up out-rebounding them. And then they got Trey Kaufman-Wren going. I think Trey Kaufman-Wren is a load on the block. He is probably one of the more difficult players to guard one-on-one down low. If you don't send that double, he's getting to that right-hand floater shot, and he's cashing it in. He had 13 of his 19 in the second half. And we talk a lot about Braden Smith. We talk a lot about Fletcher Lawyer, deservingly so. But Caleb First was huge. I thought this was Caleb First's best game of his career. 15 points, 6 rebounds, really answered the call physicality-wise. The defense at the rim was big time. The rebounding offensively was huge. If Caleb is going to give this type of production on both ends of the floor, Purdue could really seriously be looking at three-peating as Big Ten champion.
I do want to follow up on the Trey Kaufman-Wren thought, because here's a guy that when Zach Edey left, and then you had the injury early in the year to Jacobson, a lot of folks wondered, can TKR be the guy to help Purdue in the post get to a third straight Big Ten championship? Rapheal, I think he has not just answered any of those questions. I think he has excelled. And not just points, not just rebounds. He had 3 assists again last night. He is an able and willing passer. I don't think we're talking enough about how important he is, and I understand why with Braden Smith. But let's get this guy his love because he deserves it.
Yeah, I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is playing at an all Big Ten caliber level. He is getting the job done, accounting for over 24% of the Boilers' points. When they go to him, he delivers. When the game gets stuck, it gets mucked up, things are going in from deep. Purdue 0 for 6 from the three-point line in that first half. Where do you turn? You turn to Trey Kaufman-Renn. And I was in those gyms at Mackey Arena watching practice. Trey was a guy just had to wait his turn. He'd have 4 or 5 minute stretches in the Purdue practice where he'd dominate the floor. And Zach Edey be on that floor. So I think Trey's development, I think his work ethic, I think he's one of those guys in the summer, he doesn't go home. He goes to work out. And it's really showing thus far this season because he has been big time. I think that ball screen action that Purdue runs at the top of the key, I think it's the best two-man game in the country with Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. Because like you said, Rick, Trey catch that ball in the middle of the post, he's going to get that right floater, or he's going to hit Fletcher Lawyer in the corner. It's going to be a knockdown shot. I really enjoy what the young fellas put together. He has waited his turn, taken his time, and he's reaping the fruits of his benefits.
Coming up a little bit later, Rapheal on where TKR ranks inside the Big Ten at his position. Some interesting discussions. We will do our best to compare Notre Dame and Ohio State in every single category up until kickoff on Monday night. The Buckeyes are averaging 37 points per game in the CFP. Notre Dame's giving up just 17. Marcus Freeman's defense has been the immovable force. Of course, Ohio State and Ryan Day's offense has been, what do you call it, the immovable force against the something object. Either way, both of these teams have been unbelievably good. Ohio State's offense against Notre Dame's defense, I think, is where most people focus. So, Howard, let's start there, and let's start with the receivers, which you mentioned early on, the development under Ryan Day of this receiving core. Jeremiah Smith was unbelievable early. Now, Texas found a way to quiet Smith down, but Chattabuka and Carnell Tate coming up big. So how does Ohio State take advantage of what most people do believe is their biggest position edge against Notre Dame?
Well, I think first we need to figure out, will they, throw the ball to be able to run, or will they run to throw? And I think when you think about Ohio State and really what happened last week, I think they'll want to get Jeremiah Smith involved in this offense early. So for me, it's going to be a lot of movement of Jeremiah Smith to move around to get an idea of what Notre Dame is going to be playing as far as coverages are concerned. Now think about this Notre Dame team. They're going to play a lot of man-to-man. That's what they do. That's who they are. They're not all of a sudden are going to change who they are in a week. That's not how they got here. They've got challenges in the secondary. They've got to figure out how they're going to be able to help over the top. And if we do help over the top, what happens with a guy like Tate who showed up? What happens with Ibuka? How do you handle that? And that is going to be a challenge. And I think one of the issues is, how do you get pressure on Howard? And I think you have to get Will Howard uncomfortable early so that he can't make those easy throws if you're Notre Dame. And obviously Ohio State is going to put him in a position to do the best job he can. He has to take exactly what the defense gives him. And I thought he did an outstanding job. The middle of the field was open last week, and he didn't force the ball. He took what was available to him in the middle of the field. It'll be a little different. It'll be a lot different in this game. There's going to be maybe 3 or 4 throws that he's going to have to make versus this Notre Dame defense. And they're going to give him some opportunities. He has to be able to take advantage of.
But he made those. You look back, maybe not in the Texas game where he worked more the middle of the field, but that Oregon game, he made a couple of deep throws to Jeremiah Smith. The one touchdown he dropped in the bucket from some 35, 40 yards. We've seen through the playoff, he can make those throws when necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to get Jeremiah Smith going early, because it's not just his confidence, it's the confidence of this entire offense. And then you look at this. We talked about the wide receivers. I know we'll talk about the backs as well, but to me, getting them the ball in space is going to be huge, because now you're going to have Henderson particularly going against Kaiser, most likely that matchup vertically down the field. That's a matchup that Henderson's going to be able to win.
Every day.
So you want to see what that matchup is going to look like. So to me, I think early in the game, you'll see a lot of formations. You'll see a lot of movement to try to see what is going to be the tendencies of this Notre Dame defense. How are they going to react and how are they going to try to defend them before halftime.
So what about those running backs in the more traditional fashion, getting the ball coming out of the backfield? Judkins has been more of the hammer. Henderson has been more of the big play guy late in the year throughout the playoffs, but they've both been really effective.
They really have been effective. You think about when they needed to come in and run the football, they've been able to do that. And when you talk about being physical at the point of attack, this is an offensive line that's had injuries. They've had to move people around all year long, but they found a way to continue to be consistent and make those big runs. Now, have they put up the huge numbers that we believe that they can? That doesn't always happen, but they are so methodical in what they do. They never get away from the run game. The threat is always going to be there, and that's what they need to do versus Notre Dame, because I don't think Notre Dame can really slow them down with a four-man front. They're going to have to bring a safety down. They're going to have to bring an extra linebacker to try to take that run away. And what does that do? That opens up some opportunities down the field.
How cool is this chess match between Chip Kelly, the OC for Ohio State, Al Golden, the DC for Notre Dame? Two guys who have done it at the highest level for a long time.
Yeah, I really love it. Former head coaches, you talk about guys that understand the game and really understand their team and the personnel more importantly. And that's what you're going to see in this game. And that's why it's so fascinating when you talk about this Notre Dame-Ohio State matchup offensively for Ohio State, defensively for Notre Dame. Most people just will say this is going to be a runaway. This will be a game that will be blown out because the matchup, it doesn't seem like it's a great matchup for Notre Dame, but what you've seen Notre Dame do in the playoffs was adjust, make the adjustments they needed to keep them in games, and then they had their offense come along and really help them out.
Let's look now at the other side of the ball. When Ohio State's defense is on the field against Notre Dame, and this Ohio State defense coming off a performance against Texas that was just mind-blowing. Of course, Jack Sawyer salts it away with the strip sack return for the touchdown as well. But every coach will tell you, at the beginning of the day, the first thing you have to do as a defense is to stop the opposing team's run game. We're not sure how healthy Love is. We're not sure how healthy the Notre Dame offensive line is. What does Ohio State need to do up front against this Notre Dame run game?
Here's what's been really unique when you think about this Ohio State from a defensive standpoint. And this is why Jim Knowles has been able to move so many chess pieces around and really get things done. They can stop a run with their front four. They do not have to bring the linebackers down into the box and force them into run blitzes to try to take the run away. If they're able to do that, because this is they're banged up offensively, Notre Dame is on the front line, but this is still a big physical football team. And if they can get the ball moving downhill, that creates a problem for Ohio State. But Ohio State has been able to do this, stopping with the front four. And also think about this. Ohio State plays nickel, essentially, is their base personnel. And anytime you're playing a team that wants to play nickel, you're going to test them. You're going to run the ball to see if they can stop it. The difference has been with a guy like Caleb Downs, Ramsey. These guys are so physical at the point that they play like a linebacker, but they can cover. So that really takes some things away. And to watch Downs come down and really trigger when he's inside the box to run games has really been impressive. I think the other thing, you think about Cody Simon, this will be a huge game for him. Why? Because he'll have the opportunity to spy. And when he can spy, he can look at Riley Leonard, and where he's been able to beat teams is be able to convert in short yardage situations or run. Well, when you don't have to take away the run game as a linebacker and you can sit and watch the quarterback mirror him, that's going to happen in this game. You're going to see those situations, and that really lines up well for Ohio State because he can get there. He can make all of those plays. And in the secondary, they just have to do what they do and continue not be grabby, not create penalties, but really just be able to not give up the big play.
That defense has been terrific, and the front line has gotten more of the attention because of the number of sacks, because of the TFLs. But Caleb Downs has been everything that he was advertised to be before the transfer from Alabama. You mentioned a couple of the other guys in that defensive backfield in Ransom. Sonny Styles is back there, another guy who's kind of a hybrid guy that can use a lot of different things. And still, if I'm Notre Dame, I head into this game, Howard, and I think that I have to find a way to use Riley Leonard in the run game. Yes. I think if they don't, Ohio State will feast on them defensively.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of it. You have to understand where he is. And what they've done such a great job of at Notre Dame is really putting him in position to be successful at the quarterback position. I don't know that he's played at the level that they thought he would when he originally came there and committed, but I think what they've been able to do is be able to get the very most out of him, and their team believes in what he can do. It's 3rd and 4 or 5. You better believe if nothing's open down the field, he's going to pull the ball down and run, and that's where those linebackers and safeties have to be there to be able to pick up that and understand, what they're going to do, because they're going to make some plays. The special teams is going to be big in this game as well.
Now, Jim Knowles, he's not the kind of guy that is going to smile and laugh and joke around with you. He's all business all the time, and you know that he is dialing up ways, even in that nickel coverage, to make sure that he has guys to come down inside the box. I think he's less worried about covering on the outside than he is worried about what happens inside that 7 or 8 man box. Of course, all this chess match and all the game planning, it all leads up to Monday night in the national title game as we get set to finish off the first ever 12-team college football playoff. Great stuff, as always, from Howard. Head back to Terps are in Evanston for a conference clash against the Wildcats. Our coverage begins at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. You can only see Maryland Northwestern here on the Big Ten Network in the Fox Sports app. If you're a Twitter guy, an X person, whatever you want to call it, you follow Rapheal Davis. If you don't, then you're not doing social media right. He is ranking the best player at every position in the Big Ten. And according to Rapheal, in one word, it is tough. Have to agree on that. But let's put the man's feet to the fire as we get him to rank by position. Now, there's a different conversation. And before we get into it, you and I have just finished this conversation. It's very different if you're ranking just the 5 best players in the Big Ten or if you're ranking the 5 best players, one at each position. Totally different ballgame.
Yeah, completely different. And before I go into this list, especially when I think about my first position at the point guard, Braden Smith makes this list. Braden Smith is one of the better point guards in the country. But for me, if I'm going for
Hold on now. You're already couching this. You haven't even gotten to your number one guy yet.
I'm going, my number one guy is Dylan Harper.
Okay.
Because I think Dylan Harper is the best player in this conference. Pound for pound, skill for skill, I think Dylan Harper is a pro. I think Dylan Harper will be the 1st or 2nd draft pick in the 2025 NBA draft. You think what he did out in Vegas, it was 37 against Alabama, extremely efficient. He followed that game up the next night, 36 points against Notre Dame. He can get downhill at 6'5", 215 pounds. He come off that ball screen and make some magic, make some noise. He can get to his pull-up game. He can knock down a 3. Dylan Harper's a pro. I think Dylan Harper's one of those guys that's going to go to the next level and end up an all-star, play 10, 15 years in the NBA and being extremely successful. And as my next point guard, like I said, I love Braden Smith, but Kasparas Giakoušonis. Because again, Kasparas Giakoušonis is a top 5 NBA draft pick, and he's doing it at a high level in college basketball already this season. You think for the season, averaging 17 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. He's 50% from the field. He's 42% from 2. 42% from the three-point line. And in conference play, he's raised his game a level. 20 points a game in conference play. We've seen game winners. We've seen go-ahead baskets. When Illinois needs a basket, they go to Kasparas Giakoušonis. The game he did not play against USC, they got ran out of the gym. So Kasparas is showing the country that you can win with freshmen, you can excel with freshmen when you have one at the level of Kasparas.
I agree with you on Dylan Harper. I think he will be the better NBA prospect.
Yep.
Right now, I would say that Giakoušonis has been better at this point in the season for the Illini. Now, Harper's been phenomenal as well, but he also got hurt, missed a game or 2. You saw Giakoušonis miss those 2 games, and in the second game that he missed, Illinois' offense was a completely different animal. Could not go wrong with either of those choices. All right, let's go to the shooting guard. We talked a lot about Jaden Akins earlier in the show, but he is not your number one at that position.
Yeah, my number one shooting guard is the smoothest player in the Big Ten. I call him a smooth killer, and it's Bryce Williams. When you think of a shooting guard at the highest level, you think of players like Bryce Williams. He is that prototype. He's 6'7", 215 pounds. He can get downhill and finish at the basket. He'll post you up and hit you with a turnaround. He has a great mid-range game with get to that step back, and then he's 40% from deep. He is 50% from 2, 40% from 3, 91% from the line. That's what you want in your 2 guard. We've seen him go for 28 at Iowa. We've seen him go for 30 against Hawaii. Bryce Williams can flat out score the ball, and for my two guard, put that thing in a bucket, lock up on the other end. My guy Bryce gets it done.
But you do have Jaden Akins at number 2 having a terrific year for Michigan State.
Oh, for sure. I think Jaden Akins is the best two-way player in this league right now. He gets the job done defensively. He guards the best opposing wing every single night. You see what he did to Brooks Bernheiser. Brooks is one of the better scorers in this conference. Held him to 4 points. So I got to have a guy that can guard, that can defend on the perimeter. He's a knockdown shooter. He can make shots. His percentages may not show it right now. Made 3 against Penn State. Jaden Akins is my guy.
Brooks Barnhizer, interestingly enough, that's a professional television segue on your part because he is your number 1 small forward in this league.
Yep, one of my favorite players to watch, a true utility guy, a Swiss Army knife. Brooks Barnhizer can do it all. I'm going to read you his averages, not his stat line from a certain game, but his season averages. 18 points a game, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.5 steals, and he's getting a block per night. Brooks Bernheiser can play 1 through 5. He can handle the ball for you. He can guard in the post. He can post up. He gets to that one leg turnaround and knocks it down. And he's not scared. He's not tough. You saw his teeth flying out at Mackey Arena, and he continued to play in the game. I need toughness on that wing. I need some defense. I need someone that can handle it. And Brooks Bernheiser going to do it all. He's just a winner.
You've already mentioned one young Scarlet Knight in Dylan Harper as your number 1 point guard. The second guy, Ace Bailey, is your number 2 small forward.
Yeah, because I'm going off of all talent. The record doesn't matter to me. How your team is playing doesn't matter to me. Ace Bailey is a baller. He's going to be a top 3 draft pick. There's a theme here. I'm going with all NBA guys. You think of Dylan Harper, Kasperi Shakashonis, Ace Bailey's right there. That game at Indiana a couple weeks ago was incredible. 39 points in the game, 8 rebounds, 4 blocks on 55% from the field. Ace Bailey had 39 points against Indiana, and he missed 5 free throws. Kid can just straight out score. And you look at the bad shots he takes, the one-legged step backs, the bad threes he takes, he's still 47% from the field. My guy's a bucket, going to play in the league for a long time, a 6'10" shooting guard.
My favorite category by position here is power forward because you have Danny Wolf at number 1, which makes a ton of sense based on what he's done, but he plays this position so much differently than anybody else, not just in this league, in the country.
Yeah, I was talking to our producer, Pavlos, and you can really argue Danny Wolf is Michigan's point guard, especially in the half court. But I love his impact. He's averaging 12 and 10 on the season, but his game goes so much further than that. You think of that West Coast trip where they took down USC, they took down UCLA. Danny Wolf was a problem. 17 points a game in those 2, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 3.5 blocks, a couple steals. He's a knockdown shooter from 3 or 7 foot. He can do it all. He's one of the only guys in the country that I trust getting the defensive rebound, pushing it full court, not just making a play for himself, but making a play for a teammate, and that's extremely hard at 7 foot.
And the guy you have listed just behind him, a much more traditional power forward, the young fella from Maryland, Derek Queen.
Yeah, Derek Queen, a true power forward, 6'9", 6'10", hard-nosed, physical, big. He get down low on that block, and he has PhD level footwork. And as a freshman, he is not afraid to bang and boogie. He will get right in your grill. He will go finish at that rim. He will run in transition as a big. Bigs don't like to run, and Derek Queen is always getting out and running. You see him knock down threes at Purdue. His full game was on display there. He's a good passer. He's a good teammate. And then that game against Minnesota, his defense stepped up to the plate. Derek Queen, another first-round draft pick that we have sitting right here in the Big
Kevin
Ten.
Willard absolutely loves Derek Queen. You just hope you can keep him in College Park for a little bit longer than most of us expect he will actually be in college. I'm imagining, correct me if I'm wrong, the center position may have been the hardest one for you to differentiate. At number 1, you have Vlad Golden, maybe some recency bias. He had 36 points for the Michigan Wolverines recently. But he has given Dusty May, I think, everything that Coach May expected when he came along with him from FAU.
Yeah, for sure. And to start the season, it wasn't that great, but he figured it out over the last few games. He has been balling. Yeah, it was a 36 points at UCLA. They had no answer for the big fella inside. But you look at conference play, Vlad Golden's leading the Big Ten in scoring. He's averaging 22 points a game in conference play, 6 rebounds. His ability to go finish at the rim has been special. And I think he's learning it a bunch from Danny Wolf. You see Vlad Golden putting the ball on the ground a little bit more this season, driving it with that right hand to the rim. Michigan is so talented this season because, they make shots on the perimeter. Yeah, Danny Wolf is a unicorn, but they have a guy you can throw it down to, and he's going to produce every single time, more times than not. Vlad Golden has been a load since transferring in from FAU.
And I'm guessing not far behind Golden on this list is a guy we've already talked about a little bit on this show, Purdue's Trey Kaufman-Renn?
Oh, yeah, Trey Kaufman-Renn is right there. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is the best low-post scorer. When you give him the ball in that block and it's one-on-one, as long as he's 15 feet or in, Trey Kaufman-Renn's going to give you a bucket. An old-school power forward. You think Karl Malone, you think all those guys that played in the 90s, Trey Kaufman-Renn is right there with them. Ball screen action, doesn't matter. One-on-one in the post, doesn't matter. He takes a double team, he's going to make the right play. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is one of those guys in the country that is not being talked about enough. He stayed his time, he's waited his time, he trusts Coach Painter, he played behind the National Player of the Year. This season, he's a first-team All-Big Ten caliber player. Trey Kaufman-Renn is a dude.
So mark it down now. Harper, Williams, Barnhizer, Wolf, Golden. Rapheal said it on January the 16th. We'll wait a couple of months to see if he is dead on when the All-Big Ten first team is official. For Rapheal and Howard, I'm Rick. Thanks for watching Big Ten Today.